Welcome back to Dominant Mets Nation. Thank you again for returning. And today's video is going to be about Pete Alonso. We got some exciting information and some interesting information about the polar bear. And recently, we seen Pete Alonso at a Rangers game wearing a shirt that says New York or nowhere. And I was listening to WFAN, and Evan Roberts was exclaiming that this means that a signing is imminent. It's imminent. They're probably already worked out the details, and that he will sign in the next couple of days. Now, I'm not ready to jump to that conclusion, but I am ready to sit down and look at a couple very interesting facts and a couple interesting trades that were proposed. Why not? Why not? Pete's not locked up yet, so let's explore all scenarios. But first, again, I can't thank you enough for coming here, watching me. It's really cool. I do appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. And if you could support the channel, continue to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel grow. We're quickly approaching 2,000 subscribers, and we can't do this without you. And I gotta say thank you enough. I really do. Okay, so let's talk about Mr. Pete Alonso and him wearing the shirt. Does that mean he's gonna sign? Does that mean it's a ploy that he's trying to use the fans getting all excited like, oh, Pete wants to stay in New York? Is Pete Alonso trying to put pressure on the franchise to sign him? Could it be? I don't really give too much credence in the shirt. Aaron Judge wore a similar shirt a couple of years ago when he was going to sign. But I don't know. Every scenario is different. And these guys, the way they work, especially with Scott Boras, things are very manipulative. They're not as they seem. So it could be that Pete Alonso is at like a trade, a halt in this situation. I don't know. I don't know if things are positive, but what I do know and what I feel from the bottom of my heart is that Pete Alonso wants to be in New York. He said it right in the beginning of signing with Boras. He put it out that Boras, normally who is notorious for having his guys go to free agency, he already told Scott Boras, hey, tell them I'll sign. Tell them the polar bear is not in hibernation. So it's just really giving me the inclination that Pete Alonso wants to be a Met, right? But still, does David Stearns want him here? That is still the question, right? We are going to look at an interesting trade, a trade that's been posed a couple days ago. I'm not sure if all of you have heard about this, but there was a very interesting trade package, and I believe it was proposed on MLB.com, and I found it interesting. I initially brushed it off, but I'd like to really delve into this trade. Now, this trade, if you didn't hear about it, it was proposed Pete Alonso and Jeff McNeil going to the Toronto Blue Jays, for none other than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Alek Manoah. Okay, so I just automatically want to put out Jeff McNeil and Alek Manoah and focus solely on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Pete Alonso, okay? Now, we are talking about two premier sluggers, two hitters who have won the home run hitting contest, and guys who can hit home runs with the best of them, right? So what is interesting about this offer, right off the bat, you have two top talented players, and how do you measure that? Who's getting the better end of the deal? Would the Mets do this deal? Would Toronto do this deal? And if it was a couple years ago, let's say after 2021, when Vladdy just won the MVP, he had 48 home runs, had an OPS of over 1,000. At that point, if Vladdy's only 23 years old, there would be no way. Even though we love Pete Alonso, no way Toronto would even think of trading him. Because at that point, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was one of the top 3 hitters in MLB. Plus, at the age of 23, after just winning MVP, he was on possibly a Hall of Fame track. Now, after the last 2 years, Vladimir Guerrero's numbers, not that he's have been bad, but they have come down a bit. He's hit in the mid-20s home runs, had upper 90s in RBIs. His OPS has been in the 800s. He's still a very young ball player, but he hasn't taken off as an elite superstar yet, right? So that really puts him in really trade talks. Would Toronto accept it, right? And would the New York Mets accept it? I mean, Pete Alonso is an elite premier slugger, and not only is he a premier home run hitter, he is a run producer. And in my opinion, driving in RBIs at the level of Pete Alonso is a talent. I mean, let's look at this, folks. Let's look at this. And, I remember anybody who's listened to WFAN in the past, I used to always love Mike and the Mad Dog, and Mike always had a big thing about run producers. Guys who had a knack of just driving in runs no matter what. Like back in the day, Manny Ramirez, he would always drive in 130, 140 runs. I mean, there's guys that, they know how to drive in runs. And Pete Alonso seems to be one of those guys. So not only is he a guy who can hit 40-plus home runs like that, he's also had 118 RBIs or more in 3 seasons. So, I mean, look at these numbers. Pete Alonso came into the league, already hit 53 home runs, 120 RBIs. Then he went 37-94 after the COVID season, 41-31. Then this last year, 46-118. Those numbers, and I know they compared him to a legendary player in Harmon Killebrew. I mean, these numbers are prodigious. 40 home runs, 120 RBIs in 3 out of his first 5 seasons, and COVID was one of those seasons. I mean, that is nuts. That is complete nuts. Now, the thing that really stands out about Vladdy and Pete Alonso is their age. Pete will be 29 years old, and Guerrero going into the next year, I believe he's going to be 25. So you have that 4-year age gap, right? And that is significant. And another thing that's significant, Pete Alonso has 1 year left until he's a free agent. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I believe, has 2, right? So right now, it's about timeline. Are the Mets ready to win now? Are they ready to win in the next 3 to 5 years, right? So let's just say David Stern's like, I need 3 years. Okay, 3 years, that's fine. That's reasonable. That's really not that long of a time. In 3 years, Pete Alonso will be 32 years old, right? 32 years old. So if the Mets are going to be at an elite level when Pete's 32, how much more of Pete's prime does he have? How do you project Pete will age throughout that? Like, is he going to be one of those guys who is old at 32? Is he? So that's a big question, and that's where David Stearns has to rely on, like, probably medical experts. People, there's a business of projecting athletes and looking at their body type and looking at how people think they will age. That is a business. So you really got to project that. Then you got to project the window that the Mets reasonably see they're going to be competitive. If David Stearns was like, hey, you know what? We're going to be competitive this year, and I could sure use a guy who can guarantee me 45 and 20 RBIs. So maybe if that's the case, keeping Pete. But if he has more of a 3-year window, and now you got Vladimir Guerrero, and he's going to be 28, I mean, you know what? Now he's in his prime. Plus, I think if you trade for Vladimir Guerrero now, you are trading for him, I believe, at a low point. I believe that, this is just the tip of the scale for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think that 2021 year, even though he wasn't playing I don't believe he was playing in Toronto's ballpark. I believe they were playing in a minor league stadium. So I think that might have added to his power numbers. But nonetheless, His exit velocity, Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s exit velocity is always tops in the league. His expected batting average is always in the 90th percentile. His expected WOBA, expected slug. So Vladimir Guerrero Jr., despite different factors, is always in the 90th percentile. So I do love his baseball savant numbers. I do love a lot of things about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And I do think if you could get him for Pete Alonso, and you got to sign Pete. You got to sign Pete. At the very least, you would have 2 years left of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. before you make a decision. So I think there are a lot of enticing things about getting Vladimir Guerrero Jr. There really are. You know, I know Pete is, I want to put this lightly, a lot of Met fans, and I always say this, have a soft spot for Pete because he's on pace to break a lot of all-time records. But I always say this to Met fans, and I always say this to anybody. The Mets really, they more have a history of great pitchers. They don't have a history of great hitters. So their hitting records aren't so great. They're not. Really, they're not. I mean, besides Piazza, Darryl Strawberry, David Wright, I mean, they don't have great sluggers. That's not what they're known for. They're known for great pitchers. So the records, yes, it would be nice, but you know what? I'm not really worried about Pete breaking records in the next 5 years. I'm worried about winning a World Series. I want to win a World Series. And if Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is going to give me a bigger window to win one, and if he's going to give us a better, a better core, that's another thing. How do you think Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is going to mesh with the team? That's another place where David Stern has to evaluate that part of the equation, and that is a significant part. I mean, as good as Pete Alonso has been, you know what? He hasn't brought his team over the hump. He just hasn't. He hasn't. Maybe Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the way he's maturing right now, maybe he is going to be the guy that puts the team on his shoulders. I could see him being that superstar. I really can. A couple years ago, I considered him, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Juan Soto the three best hitters in the league. I really did. Now, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., like I said, took a bit of a step back based on what he was projected to do. But, if you're a Mets fan, if that trade was feasible, I would pull the trigger. And then another thing that I had been looking at, I was a bit concerned about Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s, body shape, and he's a bit husky, he's got a few extra pounds on him. But I'm like, how is he going to age? One, I know he's got great genetics. I know his dad was, Guy was phenomenal. He had a great arm, Hall of Fame hitter. Guy could hit the ball off his shoe tops. Great genetics. I know that, number one. Number two, I watched a lot of videos of Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and this guy is ultra flexible. This guy does splits at first base like nothing. So in terms of his genetics, good. In terms of his flexibility, good. And, if anybody's wondering why I'm talking about flexibility is significant because if your muscles aren't loose, you could tear things, you could pull things. I mean, it is very significant for players to be limber. It is very significant for players to be flexible. So that is a big thing. And he's got the genetics and he's got the flexibility. And I think he can still improve defensively. All right, so that's my take. My take is I would pull the trigger. I definitely would pull the trigger for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I'm not even looking at, like I said, I'm not looking at McNeil. I'm not looking at Manoah. They don't even matter. Those are just side deals. What would you do? Would you approve the trade? I don't know if the Blue Jays would, but as a Mets fan and as a Pete Alonso fan, I certainly would. And I just want to say this, folks, right now. I was looking back at a couple videos that I did over the past season, and it brought back emotion inside. And that emotion wasn't good. we have a lot of damn work to do this offseason. We really do. So, David Stearns, I'm glad you hired a lot of people in the front office because you better put those guys to work. Put those guys to work, and we better have a phenomenal offseason. You know, I like I said, I want to sign Shohei Ohtani, but whatever you do, we better be building a successful culture, a successful team. All right, well, folks, that's what I got for you. And this video, I want to specifically dedicate to one of our loyal subscribers. He recommended this topic today, basically. And, you know, anybody else who has any good topic, drop it in the comments. Always drop your comments. Love reading those. Love responding. You guys are the greatest. Girls are the greatest. And as I always say, it can't get any worse, but it probably will. Hopefully not. Hot stove. Enjoy it, folks. Have a great day. Enjoy your holidays. And I will speak to you soon.